How many founders here? Very good. How many people not founders here? Okay. What are you hoping to learn here? To be a founder. Okay. How many folks running B2B businesses? How many folks not running B2B businesses? Okay, you are going to be bored. Sorry. So what we are talking about today is software as a service, primarily B2B focused. What we are going to talk about essentially is what I've learned in the last 5 years from helping about 150 plus B2B startups of different kinds. I've done 2 B2B startups of my own, and my connection to NSR Cell is that the first startup that I was with, Elena Networks, was actually incubated here in NSR Cell in 2005, 2006. So spent a couple of years here, really good time. Both those startups didn't make it really big, and those learnings are what I'm using to help a whole bunch of startups, both in the Microsoft Accelerator for about 3 years and now in my own accelerator for the last 2 years. So that's the journey that we're talking about, and I'll be available for questions in the break as well. So feel free to have any questions and ask me either during this session or later. Okay. So today all of us are pretty much renting everything. Buying things has become old-fashioned. Buying things has become not fashionable. The reason is that there is a lot of capital available at very, very low interest rates. So it's much, much cheaper to rent things than to buy things. So whether it's Uber, whether it's Netflix, whether it's software, everything is becoming subscription based and not being bought. That's the first big change. So in 2011, Mark Andreessen wrote a blog post saying software is eating the world. Guess what? In 2016, SaaS started eating software. So today, software is a $650 billion industry that's growing at 11% year on year. SaaS is a $150 billion industry, but is growing 20% year on year. So in another 5 or 7 years, pretty much all software will be sold on a subscription and not sold one time. So this kind of a big change, a big trend, right, creates a lot of opportunities for wealth creation. What does that mean? The previous generation of winners, Oracle, SAP, a lot of them may not be winners in the next generation. And those winners are being created right now, and you have an opportunity to be among those winners. So when you look at the US, when you look at Silicon Valley, when you look at all of these kind of startups, one of the big problems is that there is a lot of startups that come up there, lot of hype, and a lot of them die very, very quickly. So when you look at the actual numbers, the Valley way of building software doesn't work reliably in reality. Less than 1% of startups that are funded actually achieve the scale that they have to. 80% of them die without making any money for founders. So that model of growing for scale is what we are calling vanity SaaS. In reality, it doesn't work. And meaningful founder outcomes are extremely diluted in this case, right? So this is a founder, he was the second employee in Pinterest. Pinterest is going public this month or next month at a multi-billion-dollar valuation. He was the second employee there. He quit without taking his stock options because he thought, I can build my own billion-dollar startup. This is what he tweeted in 2011. And this year, I met him a month ago. His startup is now at about roughly $3 million revenue, and maybe it's worth $10 million or $15 million. Okay. So if he had stayed in Pinterest, he might be a billionaire today. But because he thought he could build his own billion-dollar business, he ended up being worth about 10 million or 20 million. But there's another flip side which is even worse. It robs the employees too. Right? So these are two cases that came up. This is literally like yesterday, today kind of tweets, right? Startup sold for $200 million and the 10th engineer made $15,000. Another startup went to a valuation of $1 billion and then sold for $250 million. And this employee made $800. So in Tamil there is a saying where you take a large mill which is made of wood and then you shave it and shave it and shave it and make a top. So that's the vanity SaaS part of it, right? You take $1 billion and then you sell it for 100 million. But the India opportunity that's there before all of us today is doing it capital efficiently. And the question is, why do you need to do it capital efficiently? So SaaS today gives you really unique advantages that were not there before. So today, because of SaaS, what's happening is that you can, what earlier 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where you would have to meet the person buying the software from you, you would have to convince them that this is the software that's right for you. They will then do a POC with you for months, then decide whether to buy the product or not, then buy the product, then have a 6-month implementation cycle. That has now completely turned on its head. Today, it's no longer forced selling of software, it's assisted buying. Today, 70% of the buyer's journey happens online. They do the research themselves. They do all this market research, competitive research, pricing research, all of this stuff before they even contact a salesperson. And in most cases, they don't even care where the salesperson is because they don't want to physically meet the salesperson. They're saying, tell me everything about the product. I will compare different products. I will decide what I want to buy. Then if I need to ask for clarifications, I'll ask for clarifications. And that change is from a forced buying kind of a model to an assisted selling kind of a model or an assisted buying kind of a model. That is the big shift that's happening, right? And so once it becomes assisted buying and not forced selling, you can do it online. And it doesn't matter where you are just enabling the buyer. You don't have to be in front of them, you don't have to be in their office, you don't have to be selling to them. Does it make sense? So when we look at 1990, right, India had about 200 software companies. They were doing about $100 million in software services exports in 1990. If any of us had made a bet then saying that within 12-14 years, there will be one company which is doing $1 billion worth of exports, nobody would have taken that bet, right? But by 2002, the exports were $12 billion, so that's 120x. And there were 8,000 companies doing those exports. So that's a similar transition that we are in, that's possible from a software product perspective today, which is what we are saying. And what we are saying is there are very good, unique advantages to being in India, to being able to make this possible. Okay. So what's that? The old way is what we are calling vanity SaaS, which is investing $6 to make $1 in revenue. The new way is investing $1 to make $6 in revenue. And so where do these efficiencies come from? That's the question, right? So when you're looking at these efficiencies in terms of investing X dollars to build Y dollars, the way to think about it is, if you are building an engine and if you're borrowing $1 to build that engine and then that engine prints $1, who does that engine belong to? Versus if you borrowed $1 from someone and then you built an engine which prints $10, who does that engine belong to? So that's the fundamental shift that you have to think about, because any money that you're taking to build the product essentially is money that you're borrowing from someone which you have to return at a very high multiple. And if you borrow too much to build too little revenue, then you are not a skilled entrepreneur. So if you're thinking about the skill of an entrepreneur, a person who's able to take $1 and build an engine that prints $10 is a more skilled entrepreneur than somebody who's taking $1 to print $1. Right? So today in the Valley, companies like the latest one to go IPO, Zoom, raised about $45 million, has gotten to about $330 million in revenue, and is going IPO at a 10x or a 15x kind of a valuation. So that's a value SaaS business. On the other hand, there's another business called Domo, which raised about $600 or $800 million and got to only $150 million in ARR. So they literally burned $6 or $4.50 for every $1 that they were able to get in revenue. So imagine how much wealth destruction is happening there. So that's what we're talking about. So when you have capital efficiency, what you get is founder ownership, and you can grow much faster, because if you're capital efficient and then you add capital, your ownership of that business is higher, and you can also grow faster because you don't need as much money to grow as fast. Okay. So how are we thinking about it? What do we think is the impact from a startup perspective? Typically, when you look at the vanity SaaS model, you take a seed round, angel round, early seed round, round A, Series B, Series C, Series D. By the time you get here to the unicorn status, you have 15% founder ownership, and the probability that a funded company reaches there is less than 1%. Now, this is a very good outcome for VCs, because in this case of Domo, for example, the business has gone, it's hit a $800 million valuation, the VCs own 85%, founder owns 15%. But it's not a great outcome as we saw for founders or for employees. The alternate model is not possible in the US, but it's possible in India, which is, can you get to $1 million ARR capital efficiently in whatever way, shape or form? And what we are seeing in India is, it is possible to get to $1 million spending 100K or 150K US dollars to get to $1 million, right? So if you have built that kind of a capital efficient foundation, then it is possible to also get to a $5 million ARR. And today at a $5 million ARR, a $25 million acquisition is absolutely possible. And this is a life-changing amount of money for any founder if you own 60% or greater when you get to 25 million. So we are not saying, just bootstrap, don't raise money. That's not what we are saying. We are saying be capital efficient. And what does capital efficiency get you? It gets you a very high possibility of a life-changing acquisition at a much shorter time frame. Does it make sense? But what happens is, when you have that optionality here, right, you can also jump there, because now that you are capital efficient, now that you have gone to a certain level, it is possible to then take it to the next level, because you will start having a much better worldview of where the real problems are, where there are adjacencies. Hey, you know what, maybe I can build this additional product, maybe I can build this additional service, maybe I can serve a different set of customers and so on. And this is again something that we are seeing. So quite a few of the founders that we're working with, as they hit $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, they're suddenly starting to see, oh, you know what I thought was a very narrow niche product actually has these other use cases when I go to these different markets, but I didn't even know that these markets existed. Literal example, company that was announced its funding a week ago or 10 days ago called Whatfix. When they started off, the first business plan that they had, their total addressable market looked to be somewhere in the range of $80 to $120 million. Then they started selling, then they had one intermediate business plan which said maybe the market is about $500 million. The most recent round of funding, they're estimating the market size to be $8 billion. It's the same product. There's no difference in the product. They didn't know that these adjacent markets existed until they had actually hit the market. And in the Indian context, there are a lot of VCs who have said no to them because they said this is just a feature. This is not even a product. You can't have a large market for this. So, but to get from that, you are only a feature to a 80 million TAM, to a 500 million TAM, to today an 8 billion TAM, where they're doubling every 2 quarters, they're growing 4x, 5x year on year. That is what is possible if you are capital efficient. The moment you don't have capital efficiency, then you will just need to figure something out quickly, and that may not be the right thing to do. So how do you be a value SaaS business, right? So in the Indian context, in an assisted buying context, the key is to get to what we call founder market fit first. So founder market fit is, are you the right person to be going after this market? How many of you have read 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel? So Peter Thiel talks about, do you know something that others don't? Or do you know something that very few others do? So if you have domain expertise in a particular market, and if you are able to create value out of that in a particular domain, that founder market fit is what gives massive advantages to people. So a lot of times I see founders who maybe spend 10 years, 15 years in a particular industry, have gotten completely sick of that industry and say, I'll go do something very, very different, right? Where they have no experience whatsoever. Usually it turns out that it takes them 2 to 3 years to learn that new industry and start doing stuff. So number one, have a founder market fit, have an unfair advantage in that market relative to everybody else. Next is the problem value fit. So problem value fit is, are you solving a problem that is large enough in value to a certain specific set of customers? If you're solving a very diffuse problem for a small set of customers which is not serious enough, then you're not going to be able to do it capital efficient. So if you're solving a problem that's only worth $5 or $10 to a large number of people, it's very difficult to do that capital efficient. Versus if you're solving a problem that's worth $1,000 or $10,000 to a certain set of people, that is more capital efficient to solve. And the problem value has to be very acute. It has to be something that people are ready to buy online. It can't be something where they expect somebody to come and sell to them. Right? So that problem value fit is very important. And you have to be able to find one channel where you can get recurring, predictable revenue. So most of the times founders, especially in Bangalore, given where we are, most founders are technical founders, not business founders. So there is no understanding of marketing, there is no understanding of what a channel is, there is no understanding of what is cost of acquisition, there is no understanding of how do I increase my sales in one channel, how do I do better in one channel. But that's very, very critical to being capital efficient in the beginning. The beauty of B2B SaaS is that your customers want to pay you. Your customers don't want things for free. And the reason is that as a business, if I am dependent on somebody for my workflow or my tools, I would rather pay someone and get that in a reliable, predictable way so that I can do my business. Versus if I get something for free, then it may not be there tomorrow. Then I have to spend more time figuring out an alternative. So I don't want to do that. Okay? So your customers want to pay you. So that's a good thing. But where are your customers? How can you find them? How can you find them cost effectively? These are things that you have to really think about from day one. The beauty of it is, if you figure that out, you can actually charge business customers annual upfront pricing, which will pay for your operations in business, and that's how you can be super capital efficient in B2B SaaS. And then after you hit $1 million in ARR, then you will need to refactor your business. Then you will need to make sure that a lot of things in your business will have to change. But in the Indian context, if you are at $1 million ARR and you've raised less than 200K, you will have a lot of flexibility because you will probably be profitable at that point. You'll probably be having about $200,000 in profit. And you'll be able to use that money to build that next line of business. You'll be able to use that money to increase your marketing spend. You'll be able to use that money to hire a salesperson in some geography, all of those kind of things. But it's critical that you think about a lot of that refactoring after you hit that $1 million ARR. So what do you think? Is Salesforce a vanity SaaS business or a value SaaS business? Okay. So Salesforce, when they started off, they actually didn't raise much money. In fact, the funny part is the Valley VCs did not invest in Salesforce because they didn't think that it would succeed. So one of the only VCs who invested in them was called Emergence Capital. That was one of their first investments that fund made. So literally VCs thought that Salesforce would fail. So Salesforce could not raise a lot of money. They ended up IPOing around when they were at around $50 million in revenue. They hit almost $6 million or $8 million revenue within 2-3 years of starting. So they were making, for their every investment of dollar that was going into Salesforce, they were making almost $1 in revenue very quickly. And so Salesforce is one of the first value SaaS companies that was ever created. Right? Today, of course, they're at a $10 billion valuation. $10 billion annual revenue, expecting to double in the next 3 to 4 years. So, but that scale is possible by building a value SaaS company. And today in India, the opportunity is there to build a value SaaS company much better than there ever was in the valley. So, just want to summarize before we take any questions. SaaS is becoming what it was software 10 years ago. SaaS is going to eat the world. If you build value SaaS companies, you can build meaningful outcomes for your customers, for your employees, and for yourselves. And because of the India advantage, you can build a value SaaS business much more efficiently, more effectively than you would be able to do anywhere else. And just like the IT software boom went from $100 million in revenue to a $12 billion in revenue in 12 years, we are going to see the same thing happen in the next 10 years in India.